There is a moment most people recognize but rarely name. You look at your body, your life, your habits, and you feel a quiet confusion. You know what to do. Drink water, sleep, eat real food, move, shower, rest, and yet, you don't. What if neglecting yourself is not a failure of discipline, but a psychological survival strategy? Because people who don't take care of themselves are rarely unaware. They are not ignorant of health. They are not confused about cause and effect. They are often painfully informed. They know the body is deteriorating. They feel the tight jaw, the shallow breath, the ache behind the eyes. They see the mirror. They notice the weight change, the skin dulling, the posture collapsing inward. And still, the action doesn't happen. There is an invisible delay between awareness and movement, a thick lag in the system, as if the signal is sent, but the command never reaches the muscles. This neglect does not feel like rebellion. It feels like gravity, a heaviness that keeps you pinned in place while life continues to demand motion. From the outside, this looks simple. People say, just take care of yourself, as if care were a switch, as if the body were a machine that only needs better instructions. But internally, something very different is happening. Self-neglect is not passive. It is an active neurological state. Every time you ignore hunger, every time you override exhaustion, every time you skip hygiene, movement, or rest, your nervous system is making a decision. And that decision is not, I don't matter. It is, now is not safe. The psychology of self-neglect begins with threat perception. Not always an obvious threat. Not danger you can point to, but a chronic, low-grade sense that being fully alive is too costly. At some point, your body learned that maintenance equals exposure, that caring for yourself requires presence, and presence requires feeling, and feeling has become dangerous. So the system adapts. The brain begins to conserve energy, not because energy is scarce, but because the environment feels unmanageable. The body downshifts, motivation collapses, the future narrows. You stop investing in the self that exists tomorrow, because today already feels overwhelming. This is not laziness. This is a freeze response. When fight feels impossible and flight feels unavailable, the nervous system chooses stillness. In animals, this looks like playing dead. In humans, it looks like neglect. Not brushing your teeth, not eating properly, not stretching, not sleeping, not going to the doctor, not because you don't care, but because caring requires re-entering the body you are trying to escape. Here is the paradox. The more you neglect yourself, the more disconnected you become from your body, and the more disconnected you become, the harder care feels. So neglect compounds. Your internal signals begin to dull. Hunger becomes background noise. Pain becomes ambient. Fatigue becomes your personality. You adjust to a lower baseline of functioning and mistake adaptation for normal. This is where shame enters. You start telling yourself a story. I'm just bad at life. I lack discipline. I'm broken. Shame feels logical because it gives the chaos a cause, but shame is not the cause. It is the byproduct. Shame appears when a survival strategy is misread as a character flaw. And once shame is present, self-care becomes even more threatening. Because care now means confronting evidence of failure. Showering becomes a mirror. Eating well becomes an accusation. Rest feels undeserved. So the system doubles down on avoidance. The person who neglects themselves is not avoiding responsibility. They are avoiding contact with themselves. Because to care for the body is to acknowledge that the body exists. And for someone who has learned that existence equals pain, neglect becomes protection. But this protection has consequences. A body that is ignored does not stop functioning. It adapts. It tightens. It numbs. It stores stress in muscle and tissue. You begin living in a low-grade emergency mode, not dramatic enough to collapse, but intense enough to erode you slowly. You feel tired all the time. Not because you are inactive, but because suppressing needs requires constant energy. Ignoring thirst is effort. Ignoring pain is effort. Ignoring emotional signals is effort. You are not resting. You are restraining. This creates a life that looks calm on the surface and feels unsustainable underneath. Over time, neglect spreads. You stop taking care of your health, then your environment, then your finances, then your relationships. Because the nervous system doesn't compartmentalize. Once avoidance works in one area, it becomes the default strategy everywhere. Bills stay unopened, appointments are postponed, messages go unanswered. Not because you don't care, but because every demand feels like another weight added to an already collapsing structure. You start living reactively. Only emergencies can move you. Only crises break the freeze. Maintenance feels impossible, because maintenance assumes a future worth maintaining. This is the quiet tragedy of self-neglect. It shrinks your time horizon. You stop living for the person you will become and focus solely on surviving the present moment. The world interprets this as indifference, but internally, it is hypervigilance. You are conserving energy because you believe, often unconsciously, that you will need it to survive something worse. But here is the fracture in that logic. The threat never arrives, and the body remains locked in defense. What was meant to be temporary becomes chronic, and a short-term survival response becomes a long-term identity. You don't feel alive. You feel preserved, safe, but hollow, protected, but numb, stable, but slowly decaying. The most painful part is this. The neglect that once protected you eventually becomes the thing that harms you. The body begins to protest. The mind fogs. The sense of self erodes. And yet, even now, the system is not betraying you. It is doing exactly what it learned to do. The psychology of people who don't take care of themselves is not rooted in self-destruction. It is rooted in miscalibrated self-preservation. The body learned that disappearing was safer than participating, that shrinking was safer than being seen, that neglect was safer than engagement. But safety without vitality is not life. It is suspension. And there is no dramatic awakening from this state, no sudden surge of motivation, no perfect morning where everything resets. There is only a quiet realization that waiting to feel safe before caring for yourself will never work, because safety is not the absence of discomfort. It is the ability to stay present inside it. The body will not give permission. The fear will not vanish. The heaviness will not lift first. Movement must come before motivation. Contact must come before comfort. Care is not the reward for healing. It is the mechanism. And the first act of self-care is not fixing everything. It is not discipline. It is not transformation. It is choosing to feel just enough to re-enter your body, not to punish it, not to perfect it, but to remind your nervous system that being alive is no longer the threat. Because the truth is this: you were never failing to take care of yourself. You were surviving the only way you knew how. The question is no longer why you neglected yourself. The question is whether you are willing to slowly teach your body that it no longer needs to disappear in order to stay alive. If this video helped you, subscribe to the channel for more psychology-backed content like this, and hit the like button. It helps this message reach people who truly need it.